Hello, everyone. I want to look at the game between GM Richard Rapport with the white pieces versus GM Levon Aronian with the black pieces from the FIDE Grand Prix tournament that is going on. Today is Thanksgiving in America, and these players uh, uh, put up a hell of a fight today. Now, as you can see, I'm not starting at the beginning as usual because this is a very long game, and to me, this position is what I want to talk about, and it's very instructional. So we're at move 35, where Richard Report with the white pieces has just played knight d5 check, and so it's Aronian's turn to move. All right, so what can we say about this position? All right, Aronian, as you can see, has a backward pawn on b6. All right, and therefore this square b5 is weak. So that pawn has no chance of advancing with white's two pawns on the A and C files holding it back. So that's a weakness in the position for Aronian. For the black side, let's get rid of those graphics. From Aronian's perspective, A4 is weak, C4 is weak, and F2 is also a vulnerable target. All right, so the game is going to revolve around these weaknesses for both players. So with that in mind, let's continue. And we're going to see the instructive placement of pieces. So King F8 getting out of the check. Rook A1 protecting the pawn that was threatened. Rook C8. So Aronian is positioning his pieces right in the best position to try to assail these 3 points. Report is of course trying to attack this weakness. So now we see defense here, but also attack at the same time. Knight c3. So now we have a bit of a standstill. Aronian as black is faced with the task of trying to defend this pawn, but try to stay active enough to where he can attack white's weaknesses. So knight e5. He's threatening to win the pawn. Rook c1. And he's doing a good job causing a report to passively place his pieces. They're all on the defensive now, and no one is attacking this pawn. So this is good for black, and we can say here that black has a slight advantage. He's not winning, but he has the pressure on white in this position. Rook d2. Now we can see the potential attacks on the f2 square. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way. I don't even know if I said that, but happy Thanksgiving. Hope you enjoy yourself. So now rook cb1. So now there's a defense on that pawn and attack here. So basically, Report is willing to trade in this situation. So for instance, if Levon Aronian just simply played knight takes c4, the game is pretty much ready for a handshake at this point. So Levon wants to maintain the tension in the position, and he rightfully goes for more. Now he plays knight d3 with this attack here. And now, of course, if rook takes b6, then knight takes f2. It's a good move. Again, Report is kind of forced into passivity and just defends. g6. Rook a3. Now rook c6. The idea behind this move is to defend the b pawn, but also shift the rook over to f6 with extra pressure on the f2 pawn there. Rook b3, knight c5, and now this knight here keeps this rook honest. This rook has to stay on a3 now. So basically what black wants to do, and it's a common strategy, matter of fact, Nemzovich wrote about it years ago, is basically you want to keep, you want to put pressure on the different weaknesses in the position. And the idea is to keep switching attacks in different locations until basically your opponent is not able to. Actually, this applies to positions where you have more space mostly, but the idea is similar here, where you would keep uh, transferring attacks from different weaknesses, right? Until across different weaknesses, rather, until your opponent basically can't keep up, the defense. And so that's what Aronian is trying to do here. So he ties the rook down to a2, but then at the right time, I'm sorry, ties the rook down to the a4 pawn, but then at the right time, say this rook could be on f6, this rook could be here, right? Sorry about that. This rook could be here, and then at an opportune time, switch this knight over to e3, and then white won't be able to defend. And that works. That's a good strategy in cramped positions when the opponent has little space, because you, being the possessor of more space, you can move your pieces back and forth quicker. So you get your opponent in a situation where he's not able to hold the position together. So there it is, 94. So after 94, there's more pressure on f2, and this pawn has to be guarded still. All right, so Aronian is doing a great job just maintaining pressure in the position. So now rook a1, and there it is. Now rook f6. All right, there's only one move really to defend here. Knight g4. Now for a second it looked like there was going to be a repetition here in the draw, but Aronian rightfully presses on as he has the initiative here. So now there's ideas of maybe even kicking the knight away with move like h5. So now rook fd1. It's paramount to trade, take some of the pressure off of this square. Once again, keeping white honest and just continuing to switch attacks. So rook takes d2, knight takes d2, and now we have a double attack here. Knight f6. So Rapport finds some tactics of his own, and that's very important, is to have counter chances. You don't ever want the play to just be one way, where the opponent can just single-mindedly just follow his plan step by step. You want to be able to throw monkey wrenches in the plan. So right now Richard is threatening a fork, and he's also threatening to take here on h7. By creating such distractions, it's possible that your opponent might not find the right way to win. You make the position confusing enough to where he doesn't find the most accurate moves. King e7, just to show you. So for instance, if rook takes c4, knight d7 check is possible, and then picking up this b6 pawn. This just loses to the fork that we talked about. So Aronian brings the king in the game. King e7. Knight d5, so we can see The B pawn will now fall. King d6, and now rook d1. The idea here is if knight takes b6 and knight takes c4, rook d1, king c6, knight d7, rook d5, and then you get a position analogous to what has happened in the game. Instead, Richard didn't take the pawn right away. He played rook d1 first, knight takes c4, and you can see knight takes b6. So you have a similar position, almost exactly what I showed you. The rooks are offered to be traded, and I think it was a good move by Rapport not to trade rooks here because often these knight endings are very similar to king and pawn endings, and I think that if the rooks are traded here, that Rapport will probably lose because the king is too active in this situation and would just get right to this pawn, and it would be very difficult to stop the a5 pawn from queening. Even with the move like knight f6, king c5, knight takes c4, excuse me, knight takes h7, king b4. I don't know, knight f6, king takes a4. And again, these knights are pretty slow. And when it comes to trying to stop past pawns, this king would just come out here and white would at least be giving up that knight. This is why Richard keeps the rooks on the board. Rook c1. Now again, rook takes, rook takes. This is better, not better for white as is like he has an advantage, but better for white as far as his drawing chances is concerned. This rook ending is pretty close to a draw. So white wants to avoid the knight ending here, but not necessarily the rook ending. Aronian plays rook d4, knight e5 check, knight c5, and now Aronian Rapport grabs a pawn. In other words, he's creating a counterplay. He knows that this pawn is gonna fall, so he's making sure that he can create some type of distraction on the other side of the board. Again, it would be foolish to go, into this ending at this point because this pawn will just drop. Say rook a1, perhaps king b4, and this king is too active. So, for instance, king f3. You can play rook c check right here. Let's say king f4. Maybe you want to keep him out, so we play h6. And h3. And this pawn will be difficult to stop. Rook b7, c5. I just made some random moves, but the idea is that this pawn probably costs black at some point unless he can create some serious counterplay. But again, I didn't make all the most accurate moves here. But I just wanted to show you why Richard avoids the ending at that point. The pure, rook ending there. Because the king is too active. So he plays knight takes f7. King b4. Again, he's going after another pawn. And now knight d2. Now this would be a blunder. Can you see? If king takes a4, then knight e6 actually wins for white. This rook, the rook attacks the knight here, and this knight attacks this rook. So let's say if you try to, let's go here for instance, try to keep everything protected. Old-fashioned tactics, right? Fork. Where else you gonna go? You try to go here. Simply h3. So Aronian had to be very careful. But this is what I was saying is that even though black was slightly better, white just kept creating, little counter chances in the position. This kept Aronian from just being able to focus on just say winning the pawn and pushing the a pawn down. But Rapport kept creating threats. So knight g5. This is why you didn't see that move, but instead knight d2 was played. Knight e6 anyway, just attacking the rook and just being annoying. Aronian wants to go into the pure knight ending that he would be winning. And Rapport says nope. Rook a1, king b3, so he's making them work to get this pawn. Now f4, so there's the counterplay that I was talking about. So yes, he's going to lose this pawn, but he has pawns of his own that he can threaten now to promote. King b2, rook e1. Now there goes the pawn. Rook e5, f4, f5. G takes f5. And now Rapport is already trying to set up a situation whereby it would be like a theoretical draw. He's prepared to give this knight up for this pawn right here, but trade these two pawns off, right? Capture these two pawns and then have a rook versus rook and knight, whereby um, he can draw. Very hard to win. Rook a2 by Aronian. Rook takes f5, a4, and it looks like black is better here. Right? Black should, just be taking this piece home. But this is why they play the games, right? Rook d2, rook f8. The old rules getting behind the passers. Rook d7, check. King c5, and trying to stop this pawn. So there's the check, and now he wants to go into this completely drawn knight endgame. So now we know you can't mate with the knights. So you got these two pawns over here. If the rooks are traded, then you just simply run up here and trade that pawn off, and it's a wrap. And at that point, the game was drawn after that. So very good defense by Aronian there. This move was probably a mistake. By Aronian, this move king to c5. Probably king e5 was better, with the idea of protecting this pawn at all costs, because that's the only way he's going to win. So, for instance, given the same variation, rook takes a3, rook takes a3, knight takes, king g4. This is the moment of truth. Can white trade one of these pawns for this pawn? King h5, king g7. Right, king g5, and then the knight works itself back. Let's say king f4, king g6. Again, the idea is to keep that pawn from getting traded. G4, H6, let's say H4, King F7, King E5, Knight E3 check, King F4, Knight G2, King G3, Knight E1, King F4, King G6. And of course, when this happens, when G5 is played, then again you're gonna try to preserve the material. So with the king being further over, there's some better chances. However, in the game continuation, the king is over here, and so after rook takes, knight takes, knight takes, the king is over here, and there's no way they can really stop that. So let's say you try to rush over or whatever. Too late. And so that's all she wrote. So great game great ending rather by Aronian and Rapport. Actually, I would say better ending by Rapport because he drew a very difficult position. He had multiple weaknesses in the position against a 2800 player, and he was able to hang in there. There was plenty of chances where he could have slipped up, and he hung in there, and it was actually Aronian who slipped up, right at the end. So good game. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, happy Thanksgiving. Please like, subscribe, and all of that good stuff. See y'all later.